It'd be funny.
Hello, everybody. Hello, how's it going? So I don't have a little board to write on today. I know I usually sometimes write on a board if you've been at my other stuff, but then I realize when we record, everything's backwards and you can't see it anyways. But I mean, it's good for you guys, right? But this is gonna be a fun subject anyways, because we're talking about farts, right? So who farts? Anybody fart? Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everybody does. So let's take a fun little tool. How many times a day do you think you fart? So you don't have to answer the number. Do you fart in between 10 and 30 times a day? Raise your hand. Just like an idea, right? Maybe? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, between 10 and 30, maybe. Yeah. Do you fart between maybe 30 and 50 times a day? Maybe. Yeah. What about 50 and 100? Maybe? Plus, did you ever count? No? Okay.
Well, no.
You did.
It all depends what you eat.
You did. Does it?
Sure does.
Yeah.
Onion
Right?
soup is bad.
Onion soup is bad. Yeah. Nice. What else is bad? What else might be a bad farty food? Turnip? Yeah. What else? Any other bad farty foods? Cabbage, yeah. Anything else that you guys can think of? Broccoli and cauliflower, yeah.
Beer.
What about what?
Beer.
Beer, yeah. Yeah, beer makes you like burp, so it makes the gas come up, right? It might make the gas come out too. Spinach, yeah. What about leftovers? You guys ever eat leftovers like a day later or 2 days later? Have you noticed that might be a gassy thing?
If it's from the store, yeah.
Leftovers.
You made it yourself, maybe not.
Maybe, yeah. Interesting, eh? I don't know, right? Food for thought. Yeah. So why do we fart? Like it's good to fart, right? We should essentially fart between, Western medicine says anywhere between 20 and 30 times a day, right? But Ayurvedic medicine says between like 10 and 20. Okay, so when we fart excessively, I'll get into what's happening in the body when we fart excessively. It's not a detrimental thing to have gas and to have bloating. Okay, it's good prognosis. It's okay, but it can be an underlying cause of disease. It can be an underlying cause of, or the cause of the beginning stages. So that's why you really want to focus on gas and bloating and remove it, because it can be the beginning stages of leaky gut, diverticulitis, any type of autoimmune, colitis, like any of those digestive systems or diseases essentially. So we really want to nip the gas and the bloating in the butt, right? But you don't want to nip it in the butt. You gotta let it out. So on your sheet, what's the little saying there that I put in brackets? Yeah.
When you have to fart, just fart.
Right. So when you have to fart, just fart. Okay. So, and the reason is when we block any type of urges when we have, then it's gonna back up in the system. So who here has held in farts before? Yeah.
So now if we fart anywhere, we can say it's rock sand. She told me to fart.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story, but yes, you may. Yes, you may.
Rock sand told me I had to
Right?
fart.
Right. Because when we hold in our farts, like you feel like shit on the inside, right? Like your shit is literally fermenting. Like you're literally getting a sewage plant going on in your gut when you have that excess gas and that bloating and it's not being released. It needs to be released, okay? So as you guys were growing up, did anybody ever have any fun with your family with farts?
Now.
Always? Yeah. And you might be like, no, it's weird. It is weird, right? Maybe it's weird. I don't know. But our dad was a classic case, and so it actually helped when me and my husband first got together. The first time my husband farted around me, I laughed my ass off. And then he was like, she's a keeper. Because with my dad, he was all like, he farted a lot. Like he counted one time and it was 100 times a day. And we're like, really? And sometimes it was very foul. And then now it's really great because it's not great. It's not great. But you can see that from a young age for him, that was the beginning of his disease process. And now he had to go on prednisone because it was getting into his joints. And it was some type of arthritis. I don't remember the exact name, but essentially he was in pain everywhere. In pain, and he was puffy, and so the disease started to spread, and it spread into his joints, right? And then when I look back and I think about it, oh my God, like smelly gas is where it all began, right? And that has to do with weaker digestion, with weak agni. Okay, so we'll get in there. We'll talk about that, but we gotta kind of laugh about it a little bit, right? Because it was funny. You know, we'd be sitting at the supper table and I'd like have this big fart and everybody would laugh and I'd be like, whack, and then, you know, but she'd laugh too. And it was funny, right? Great. Yeah. And it was funny. Yeah, it was funny. And then on my mom's side, they had some stinky farts over there too. Like my aunt would be in a tent with her husband and she'd fart and then all of a sudden you hear her laughing her ass off and my uncle comes running out. He's like, Jesus Christ, did you have to do that in there? You know, like she just stunk up the tent. So it was always a funny thing, right? And so you got to just kind of laugh about it and try not to worry about it so much, but it is a good clue. It can be a great clue into stuff that's going on in your body. Cool? Does anybody have any questions about any of that? No? Okay. So the average person releases 2 cups, which is like why it's like a American thing. It's something like a pint, like 1 or 2 pints. And I had to Google like, what's the difference between a pint? Anyways, it's 2 cups. We know cups, right? So that's a lot when you think about it with gas, and that's average. So average, they're saying a person that farts 20 to 30 times a day, right? So it's a lot more for others. And so I don't think you could probably grow stuff on farts, didn't they? Say like, yeah. Like that, it's a lot. It's okay. Like it's a lot of energy, right? You can, and it's kind of fun. But we ultimately we don't want to hold it in, okay? Because gas it can be said that it's air. So if you take in a lot of air, right? And then you burp and you fart, that's gas, okay? But according to Ayurveda, it's actually food fermenting in the gut. And so when food starts to ferment in the gut, what do we think when we hear the word ferment?
Yuck.
Any idea? Do we think yuck? Do we have any thoughts on what does fermentation actually mean? What is fermentation? Getting old. Not fermenting, but you maybe. Yeah. But that's great though, because old is the key, right? Yeah. Getting old. So yeah. So essentially it's food rotting in your gut. Okay. And we have 22 feet of small intestine and we have 5 feet of large intestine. So there's a lot to go around, right? There's a lot of movements that have to happen in there. Women have slightly longer ability. I can't remember if it's a part of the colon or part of the small. I'm pretty sure it's part of the small. Don't quote me on that one. However, we have a little bit more kinks and curves to go around. Okay. So essentially our digestive system is very complex, but we might not think of it in that way. It's just hanging in the center of our body. So we have like the esophagus and then everything kind of runs down, right? And then it comes into the stomach. And then in the stomach, it's got all the food, right? It's got to emulsify the food, but the stomach doesn't have teeth. Stomach has to use digestive enzymes to do that. Juices, gases, essentially. So we do need some fermentation. But then from the stomach, it has to go from a more acidic state when it gets right into the duodenum, which is the next part, which is the part of the small intestine, it has to go to a neutral state. And so it's a big jump from acid to neutral. And so there can be a lot of issues right in the duodenum. So that first part of the small intestine, it's not uncommon to have big issues there, especially if things are more acidic once they get there. And so then it's part of digesting the food too. But if the stomach's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, then the small intestine has to do it. More pressure, more stress. Then it's got to go all through the small intestine, and then it comes down around here. So we're going to get you to stand up for a second because I want to show you something cool. So I'm going to show you so the duodenum is a really tricky part of the digestion. Okay, so you can probably feel like your stomach sort of like around here as you can push on it, but then we have the duodenum. But if you come over here, find the front of your hip. So find the front of your right hip. Okay, your right, not my right. Yeah. And then find your belly button. Okay, so you find the front, yeah, there. So you're probably making like a diagonal line, right, ish, from the bottom of the right hip. And then if you go about halfway in between there, take your fingers and just kind of push halfway in between there and give it a little bit of a push and see how it feels.
Ow.
Right, okay. So if you're feeling a little bit of ow, then that's okay, but that's probably an area where it might be a little bit of a tougher digestive area for you. And what's that part is that is at the base of our ascending colon. So the poop, the crap has to come back up the ascending colon, then go across, then go down, then come out. Okay, so this part of the gut is a really tough part. That is where it's called our cecum. And so we have the cecum, which is the base right there where it sort of attaches the small intestine to the large. So food ferments there. It can ferment there a lot. And so when you have bloating, I invite you to notice where is the most prominent part. If you took your abdomen and you put it into 4 sections, where's the most prominent part of your bloating? Just to check that out the next time you have bloating, okay? It might be more in the stomach, small intestine. It might be down low. It might be more on the right side, we don't know. Also, the appendix is down there as well, okay? And the appendix, it actually has a really big job, but it can get backed up. And then so when it gets backed up, when it gets overwhelmed by eating junkier, crappy foods, by going out for beer and wings, you know, you might notice that you have some soreness in your stomach that night because that area is sort of getting backed up. But what the appendix does is it is a container for good gut flora. So if you have some type of gastrointestinal disease where, you know, you have diarrhea and it's pushing it all out and it's getting rid of the parasites, well, your appendix repopulates your colon with good gut bacteria. So it's important, right? And we're like, oh, we don't need that thing, but we kind of do. We kind of do. So what you can do every morning is just kind of palpate the cecum a little bit. Just give it a little bit of a push. And if you're like, oh, that hurts, then just grab some oil and just rub. Give your belly a rub. So at night before you go to bed, lay down on your back, give your belly a rub. Rub all over if you like, right? Rub a little bit lower, like rub your butt, you know, rub wherever it feels good, okay? So you can sit back down if you want to, but that's just a tough area of the colon, okay? That we really want to be mindful of. And we think, okay, it's kind of weird to rub yourself. And yeah, sure, it's weird to rub yourself, but no, it's not. Especially if you have circulatory issues, okay? Especially if things are stagnating, fermenting in the gut, you got bloating, then there's some circulatory issues going on. You get cold hands and feet, right? Anybody get cold hands and feet? We got some circulatory issues, yeah. So we need to warm the body. We need to be easy on digestion. When they say, according to Ayurveda, you are what you can't digest. Okay, so whatever your body isn't digesting properly, it gets lodged in you essentially, and it becomes part of you. It becomes part of your blood, part of your tissues, part of your systems of your body. So we want to be able to digest. We want to be able to be in constant sort of ebb, flow, and flux in the body. How does that sound? Cool to everybody? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So when we are weak, then our digestion is going to be a little bit weak. So how do you know? What are some symptoms when you're feeling weak? What might some symptoms you experience be when you're feeling off, let's say? Lightheaded, okay. Yeah. Tired, yeah. Anything else? Cranky, yeah. Yeah. Anything else you can think of? Crampy, okay, yeah. And notice where you're crampy too, because that's interesting, yeah. Yeah, so when we're feeling all of those things, then it's an indication that there's something off, right? And the first place to really send some attention is to your digestion. And if you can notice the subtleties of when you're feeling off, and it's generally in your emotion, because our blood is very sensitive, like our nervous system is very sensitive. So when there's any type of toxicity or something off with your blood chemistry, then your mind is gonna go. Okay, you might feel scattered, you might feel ungrounded, you might feel anxious. So if you're starting to feel those types of things, those are great indications that something's going on when you feel that subtlety. Okay, so then you want to dial it back and focus back on digestion, on what you're eating, on how you're eating, on how you're digesting, and all of that. Cool.
How can you dial it back if you don't know what
Yeah.
to eat?
So, well, and that's,
You know what to eat.
yes, and that's, yeah, we'll get there.
I know
Exactly.
now, but
Yeah.
I didn't know before.
Right, yeah.
Right? Like
Yep.
8 years ago, when I stopped eating all that crap.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel way better now than I did 9 years ago.
Right. Yeah. And how did you start to learn that?
Well, I had a tumor in my stomach and I had no choice.
See, sometimes, unfortunate, sorry to hear that.
It's
Sometimes
fine,
we
I'm
have,
fine now.
yeah, but sometimes we need that little bit of force, right? And great for you for noticing how you're feling now and what foods bother you and all of that, and for showing up. That's awesome.
Drives me nuts.
That's why. Yeah, it can be kind of be like a love,
You know that
love
feeling?
hate, like a bit of a love hate kind of thing.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh,
It is. It really is. It really is. And so, it totally is.
I'm glad someone understands me.
We all get it on like some form or level, right? We do.
Right?
So instead of, okay, so here's something really cool. We know that we have lots of bacteria in the gut. You guys know that, right? They say, oh, you got bad bacteria, you got good bacteria. Like what, how do I know? Who's good, who's bad? Like how are you gonna tell me, right? Well, they'll tell you by those symptoms that you're feeling. You're feeling good, you're feeling on top of the world, then you probably have a little bit more good gut flora going on. You're feeling crappy, then the bad bacteria is probably taking over a little bit. And so when we have a bit of a weaker digestion, it's a fight. It's a fight for our body to absorb it and our organs to get it, or that bad bacteria to get it, okay? If that bad bacteria wins, then our organs don't get nourished and don't get fed, essentially. And when that bad bacteria keeps repopulating and flushing, then it's live stuff. So they're basically also peeing and pooping inside of our gut. And so that's creating more fermentation. It's kind of like just a cycle, right? But don't worry, there's lots of things that you can do. Okay? Don't want to scare you because, parasites, you could easily go there and be like, oh my God, but I don't want to scare you, okay? Ideally, coming back to feeding the body properly, essentially, okay? So I'm just looking at all of my notes here. So when the gut gets irritated, so we have lining in the gut, lining in all of the intestine. Let's go there. When there's excess gas and bloating, there's excess fermentation. We have a higher acidic level, okay? And what does acid do? Any idea? If you stuck your finger in acid, yeah, burns. So it breaks down. And in our gut lining, we're supposed to have this nice, thicker mucosal lining. So we're supposed to have kapha in the gut. Okay, that's an Ayurvedic term, but it's more, it's lubrication, it's protection, it's nourishment, and we're supposed to have that. But if we have more gas and more bloating, then it gets broken down, okay? And then eventually it can break down and leaky gut can happen. And when the bacterias are absorbing all of that, the bad bacteria, when they're taking it all, it takes away from that protective lining that we have. And then those toxins, we can say, the trauma, the toxins, the waste, whatever, that seeps out. And then it seeps into the blood. And then you're gonna notice some different symptoms like bad breath. Anybody ever have bad breath? Yeah, right? Had bad breath before, okay? So there's some indications that you wanna look for with bad breath. If it's more of a sort of sharp bad breath, like oniony, let's say, like real sharp, then that would be more of a pitta type disorder. So that would be more inflammation, okay? If it's a bad breath that is a more like your grandma's closet that smells kind of like mothballsy, you know, mothballsy, is that a word? Then that's a bit more of an indication of kapha. And what that means is that's just stagnating, heavy, earthy, watery, you know, so it's something that you need to warm up to get rid of. Whereas a sharp bad breath, that's something that you need to cool down. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. Hot, cool. If it's kind of cool and old, mothbally, you think of like damp, right? Think of damp. Yeah, me too. So those are some things. So also bad breath, smelly gas, body odor. Okay, body odor is another indication. Acne. Acne is a really neat one because acne is an indication of more pitta, so of more fire, of inflammation in the skin, but it's also an indication of trapped inflammation. So it's where the kapha, where the earth and the water is sort of trapping the fire, right? So it's like that fire is kind of like smoldering, it's not evolving essentially and changing. So acne is an interesting one. If you're having a lot of urine, anybody pee lots and lots? So if you're peeing lots and lots, all of that extra fermentation is really hard on the liver and it's really hard on the kidneys because those are essential organs that remove toxins from the body. And so when the liver gets stressed out, it's like it can be full of toxins. And so it gets really stressed out. Okay. So the kidneys, when they get stressed out, they dump urine and they just keep getting rid of it. And so if you're constantly getting rid of urine, how many times a day do you think that you pee? Those of you who put your hand up, maybe. Yeah?
At least 15.
At least 15 times a day, yeah? And is it quite a bit at a time? Might it be like a cup? Is it more like an ounce? About half a cup-ish, yeah? Half a cup, 15 times a day. Yeah, yeah. And is it clear?
Sometimes it is majority, no.
Okay. Is it darker yellow or is it lighter? Sometimes it's darker yellow, sometimes it's lighter, sometimes it's clear. Okay. Okay. So it's a little bit variable. Yeah. Okay.
Starts off dark.
Yeah. In the morning.
Throughout the day, it's clear.
It's clear. Okay. Yeah. And do you go in the night?
3 or 12.
3. Always at 3?
Just like an
Oh,
alarm
interesting. Interesting.
You're like a
Cool.
20 years old.
Cool. Okay. That's interesting. That's great. So what was your first name again?
Jan.
Jan. So Jan goes 15 times a day, about a half a cup at a time. So she would go, let's say, 7 cups of pee a day. Did I do the math correct?
Yeah, you're pretty
Ish, right? So when you think about that, like it's a fair amount, right? And when you go in the middle of the night, you go as well. So she's waking up, or it's always at 3. 3 is in the vata time of night. 3 o'clock is the air time of night. And when it's the airy time of night and day, it's hard to be grounded. Okay, so it's an indication that your digestion is variable. It's good, then it's not. Then it's cold, then it's dry. It's like all over. It's like, I'm just going. See you later. That's like the vata person and the vata stage of life as well, right? So we really want to focus on nourishing the vata. And nourishing the vata is more coming back to the earth element, essentially. So it would be, yeah. So it would be like having, having more good fats like avocados and bananas and oatmeal and well, we can have a chat. You can make a consultation with me. But so essentially her kidneys are just like, they're just dumping, right? But it's variable. So I'm going to talk a little bit about hydration now. Okay. So if your kidneys are constantly dumping, do you also experience dry mouth? Okay. Where your mouth is dry. Do you experience cold hands and feet? Do you experience dry scalp? Is your hair thinning a little bit? Like, you don't have to say yes to all of these, but if you say yes to quite a few, then I'll just continue. Dry skin, right? Maybe a little bit of not a regular routine during the day. So you're kind of all over the place, right? No set routine. What else? There's so many things that in sort of that vata stage of your life. So let's say 50 and up. Okay. So if you're experiencing a lot of those, especially the dry aspects, then that can be an indication that you are hydrated extracellularly, which means that the water that you're drinking or the hydration that you're trying to take in isn't getting into the cells, isn't getting absorbed into the cells. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like you have a pipe and you're just putting water on the outside of the pipe and you're like, oh, that's good, but there's stuff in the pipe that I need to clean out there, right? So if the kidneys are always dumping, then you're just pouring the water on the outside. So you need that intracellular hydration. And it's not an uncommon thing. It's actually quite common now because we're drinking water that's stripped. We're drinking water that comes from a bottle. It's like that movie that, you know, air in a bottle.
Yeah.
So we're drinking those types of things, right? Where our water is stripped and it's not coming from, and if you were at my first workshop, then you would have heard me talk about years ago, they drank water that flowed down a stream through a bunch of rocks and collected all the minerals, and then they drank it. And it's the electrolytes, it's the minerals that your body needs to intracellularly hydrate you. That was a very long word, right? Okay. So what can we do? What can we do? First off, right, yeah, and it doesn't mean go drink Gatorade, because I'm going to tell you a super easy thing that you can do. It doesn't mean that. Don't do that. Don't do that, in fact. It just means there's a few different things. So first off, when you're drinking cold, stripped water, cold constricts, right? So cold, if you try to, if like there's a rock outside in the winter and you try to dump some water on it, it's just gonna flow on the outside, right? I know a rock probably isn't the best example because they don't absorb anything, but maybe it's a good example because they don't absorb, right? So we need to first off drink water that's warmer. It doesn't have to be warm, it doesn't have to be hot where it burns your tongue. It just has to be room temperature. Room temperature is fine. Warm water is great. You might notice that once you start to drink more warm water, that you get sensitive to cold water, and the cold water feels like sore on the belly, okay? So now if we're drinking town water and it's warm, is that enough?
That's disgusting.
Right?
I was just
That's disgusting. That's awesome.
Disgusting fluoride.
No, right, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So it's okay. So it's not enough, right? We need the electrolytes that we're missing, that we've lost. So simply put, we can make an Ayurvedic Gatorade, and all that is just warm water. Squeeze lemon or lime into your water. Squeeze the lemon or lime so that you get just the juices, so that you have sour. Sours, number one, help to create saliva, secretions, movement. It puckers, right? It puckers you and then your mouth waters. What happens in the mouth happens everywhere in the gut. You ever have a bunch of hot wings, really, really hot sauce? It's hot on the way out, right? Right? So the same thing, when you have those sours, it lubricates in the mouth. It's going to lubricate, it's going to help to lubricate everywhere else. So you can have a little bit of that. If you tend towards disease of lacking, like let's say you're anemic, okay? If you get a lot of headaches, if you're drier, if you're always feeling lightheaded, then those are more vata indications. So a pinch of salt might be something that would be great in there for you. If you tend more towards diseases of excess, where you hold on, bloating can be that as well. Bloating can be vata or kapha or pitta. It can be any one of those. But edema is a good example. So if you look and you have like that sock line, like that pretty dented sock line, or if you can just push on your leg and it stays indented, that's some edema. So you really want to be mindful of your salt intake. However, a little bit of salt might be okay. So just something to kind of take a look at. But that is a super simple Ayurvedic Gatorade that you can drink 20 minutes before you eat every day. So have it 20 minutes before you eat, then eat your meal, because that also works as a digestive aid, right? And we need digestive aids, especially if we're going to be eating lots of dry stuff like granola bars and things like that. Yes. It's okay. Yeah.
Fermented food.
I will get there.
Oh.
I'll go.
Slippery elm.
It's okay. Yes, slippery elm is good. Yes, it is. Yeah. No, slippery elm is an herb that is really great. It's very unctuous. It's slimy. So it is very wonderful to help kind of lubricate. Licorice root is another one that's very slimy. Ashwagandha is also another one that is, that's a nervine. Yes, ashwagandha, it is. Yeah, it's a nervine. It's a really wonderful nervine. Yes. Yep.
Really helps with the gut.
Yeah. Do you find it helps?
Oh, yeah.
How do you take it? Do you take it as like
Well,
a,
I make my own,
a pill?
or I just buy it at the health food store.
okay. Do you buy it as a powder?
I grind it, put it into
Cool.
capsules.
Nice. Awesome. Cool. Great. That's good. Yeah,
Or
ashwagandha is
I'll
awesome.
drink it.
Yeah.
With tea.
You can, yeah, just like in powder. When I have it, I usually put like a teaspoon and then I put it in warm water and then just.
You're shocked that somebody actually does it.
No, I'm not. I think it's amazing. Yay! No, I think it's amazing. That's
No, it's
awesome.
really fun to
Yeah.
do too.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God, herbs. We could have like, we could have.
will never leave if we start.
I know. Yay! I found my herb friend. Yeah, no. We can chat forever. So we're gonna stop for a second. We're gonna dial back. It's okay. We're gonna dial back. So where were we now?
Can you spell that
Except-
word?
Ashwagandha.
Oh my goodness.
ASHWAGAND.
G, yeah.
Sometimes there's an H and an A.
Yeah, you're right.
Ashwagandha.
Ashwagandha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see it.
I don't know.
It wasn't right this
Sometimes
time.
there's like at the last D, sometimes there's a DHA, but even if you type it in that way, you should still find it.
So you can get
Yeah.
that at the health food store here?
No, she doesn't have ashwagandha here. I have a pile, so if you want to test it and you want to try something, you can let me know. And I can get you some.
And the licorice root?
Licorice root, I have like a whole cabinet full of wonderful herbs, so I can get you some of that as well. But we'd have to chat first though, because herbs aren't just something that you throw out there. There's certainly, I mean, just like, you know, you go out and there's poisonous herbs out there, there's poisonous plants out there, there's plants that'll counteract with different pharmaceuticals, so you really got to be mindful of it. You do, yeah. However, ashwagandha is one that really doesn't have too many contraindications, which is good.
You can get it on Amazon for about $31.
Yeah, and it's pretty big, yeah.
That's a big bag.
Yeah, and if you use it a lot, then it's great. Yeah, and it's one that you can use more often because it is a nervine. So what that means is when something is a nervine, it goes into what's called the Maja Dhatu, which is the bone marrow, essentially the nervous tissue of the body. And it goes into the Mahavahashrotas, which is, it's just fun, right? No, you're like, what the? Okay, I just like to say it, so I'm just gonna say it. But I'll say it in English, which is basically the nervous system. That's all. It's a nervous system. So it really helps with the nervous system. And a third of your nervous system is in the gut, right? So we really need to be mindful of that as well. Okay, that's why you might notice that if you're going to do something that's really scary, what do you feel in your body?
I feel like you have to go to the bathroom.
Right away, and I can't go anywhere. Because I'm stuck on that.
Right, so you have that athletic poop, right? Where you just stop. Yeah, so you know, right? You know that the nervous system is in the gut because you feel it. You've already felt it, right? So that's pretty fun. All right, so I'm just gonna go a little bit over to when it's in the nervous system, okay? We experience the scatteredness, the ungroundedness, the anxiety, all of that, right? The blood chemistry changes and we notice that and we feel it, right? So what also leads to that when we're feeling anxious is we make poor decisions, right? You notice you make poor decisions, you might emotionally eat, right? And so there's a clear indication of like, something's off. The gut brain is like, they're not communicating and something is off, right? And we don't want that. Okay, so now I'm gonna move into something a little bit different. Oh no, I wanted to say one more thing that I had in there. That's a really great thing that you can do that's sort of a lost art, but I'm not gonna tell you to go home and do it, okay? Do not go home and do this. If you want to chat to me about it, then you most certainly can. But a really great way to get rid of bad gut flora and to get the good gut flora to come back in, to help to nourish the body, especially with those vata type disorders. So especially with those disorders where you're feeling a little bit scattered or anxious and you're dry and your kidneys are just flushing, is to cleanse the colon. And how do we cleanse the colon? You can try to cleanse the colon with things that you eat and bringing it down with herbs and stuff, and use aromatic herbs to help evacuate the bowels. But the best way to get to the colon is to go right to the colon. Any idea? Yeah, I heard somebody say it.
Enema.
Yes, exactly. Enema therapy. Yes. So enema. Okay. So that is the best way to do it. But don't go home and do an enema, because there are so many different ways that you can do it. It's a neat experience. Okay? It's a very neat experience. But it does, but so it's not necessarily to say Ayurveda does enemas a lot differently. I mean, you might have heard of some people doing a coffee enema. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, right? And so like you're using coffee, and essentially that's a cleansing enema. So you don't always want to do a cleansing enema. It's called a basti. So you want to do, especially if you have more of that vata type disorder, you want to do a nourishing enema. So you want to do an enema that's with more oils. So you can do a ghee enema, you can do a sesame oil enema, you can do bone broth enema, those types of things. And so don't go home and do it. Yeah. And so what that does is that nourishes the gut flora, right? So that helps to rebuild, because when we're destructing, when everything is becoming destructive, we don't want to cleanse it, because cleansing is depleting. We want to nourish it. And so that's something that you can do. But as you do it that way, like I said, don't go home and do it. But you would do a nourishing, you would do an oil enema, and then you would do a cleansing enema, and then you would follow up with another oil enema, so that you kind of get, a nice little blend, but you have that sort of goodness happening in between. Cool. Anyways, that's a really great way to do it. But like I said, there's a lot of other things that you can do. I mean, it's great to do an enema once a year, at least in the spring. The spring is the best time to clear the crap out. It's the kapha time of year when things start to accumulate and build. So that's a great time to do it. Alrighty?
You just
Yes.
don't come home and do it, so where
Yeah.
do you go to do it?
Well, you can talk to me about it. You can talk to me about it if you want. Yeah. Go to my place. No, but essentially, I mean, it's a different experience, right? So if you're tense, what happens when you get tense? What do? When you get tense and you're nervous? You clench. And you probably clench your butt cheeks. You clench your anus, clench your pelvic floor, clench it all, right? You can't be clenched when you're doing an enema. You need to be relaxed. You need to be very relaxed. It's also the way you put the enema in. Don't just put it straight. Upward a little bit. So it's the angle of how you put in that little bit of a probe as well. It's how you're feeling when you're putting the probe in. Like it can be a very emotional experience. So you don't want to just be like, oh, I'm just gonna go do an enema, do the enema and see how that feels, right? And then you want to try to hold the stuff in for a little bit, but you don't want to hold it in when you have the urge to let it out, because when you have to fart, just fart, right? When you have to poop, just poop. So it's all the same. When you have to sneeze, just sneeze, or with all of that. So you want something that you need to be mindful of. You also don't want to eat like right before you do an enema. You don't want to eat right after you do an enema, You don't want to do an enema if you're pregnant. You don't want, there's so many things. You don't want to do an enema if you have fissures, anal fissures. You don't want to do an enema if you have hemorrhoids, right? There's a lot of contraindications about doing an enema, okay? So that's all to say about that. We won't go there because we could have another whole workshop just on enemas, but we won't.
Well, there you go.
Well, there you go. Yeah? Okay, cool.
We'll have 3 people.
They're like, yeah, we'll have 3 people. Oh, that's funny. We'll have 3 people. All right. Does anybody have any other questions so far? Okay, I won't. He'll be too tense. Just kidding. Does anybody have any questions so far before we move on a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
I just have a hard time saying this.
Diverticulitis, yeah.
Now, the doctor did not explain this to me, what it's about, what it is, how to fix it, nothing.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about it being stuck in the lower intestines, I'm sure that plays a factor with that disease, right?
If you have fermentation and bloating happening, does that play a factor with diverticulitis? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, with it
Okay.
being stuck like your food and you can't go for a shit or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That plays a part with the diverticulitis?
You could, for sure. They could have a very strong relationship. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Any type of itis, tends to be more of a pitta type disorder, so inflammation, where, you know, there can be inflammation going on in the gut, but that's where it's essentially cited from. It doesn't mean that it's only a pitta thing, because the vata is air, and the vata is the pusher and the mover of disease. So was it diverticulitis, or did it start at something else, right? I mean, there could have been something before that pushed it to diverticulitis. Maybe there was something in the colon, which is a big vata site, and so we'd have to really take a deep look at what's your prakruti, what's been going, meaning what's your true nature, what's been going on from the time you were born till now. You know, what other types of diseases have you had? We got to look at the pathogenesis. What's the disease process of all of it, right?
Oh, okay.
But when there's some type of itis, it's a pitta thing, an inflammation thing. But with what you're saying about the you know, not flush, like the kidneys are flushing, and then there's the dryness, and so there's a lot of variability going on there, right? So first off, we would really take a look at vata and try to nourish vata for the most part, right?
Coffee enema?
What's that?
If all else fails, coffee enema?
Don't do a coffee. I wouldn't suggest a coffee enema. Yeah, because if you think about coffee, right? If you have diverticulitis, which is like, you know, an inflammatory thing, and you think about coffee, when you have a cup of coffee, how do you feel?
Hyper.
Yeah, you feel stimulated, right?
Oh, yeah.
You feel stimulated, you feel hyper. That's inflammation, right? So it can just add to the inflammation. So more or less, we want to try to calm the waters a little bit. Yeah, bone broth would probably be a better choice. Yes, but please do not go home and do an enema and then go to the doctor and say, Roxanne told me to do an enema, because I did not. This is on video.
Just kidding.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay, thank you.
All good. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so when we have issues, so we're almost at what to do, but we've kind of added a few things in as we went, you know, with what to do. But it could also be that there's some enzyme deficiency. And so what that means is, especially if you have dryness, dry mouth, we need digestive enzymes to break down our foods. And digestive enzymes are through saliva. Okay, so those digestive enzymes start to flow before we're even preparing our food. So when you walk in and you smell, you know, food, Chantel, then your digestive enzymes would be going. If you're making your own food, then you're smelling it, you're experiencing it, you're feeling it. You're probably like, oh, your mouth, you know, when your mouth starts to water because that food, it's your digestive system getting ready to process food. Because it's got to take this big food chunk of meat, let's say, and it's got to break that down. It's got to break down all the amino acids. It's got to break down everything and turn it into a liver, turn it into your eyesight, turn it into your bones, turn it into your skin, turn it into your neurons, your brain, your fat, everything. That's a big freaking ask, right? So when we eat all of this food, it's got to turn into us. That's how we build. That's how we continue to go, right? You wouldn't put sand in your four-wheeler. Your spouse would be very mad because it wouldn't run, right? So that's what we need to do for ourselves too, right? We need to put in the good stuff, okay? So when you start to get those digestive juices, those enzymes, those digestive enzymes going, that helps to break down your food. But the biggest digestive enzyme that you have, and it's not necessarily a digestive enzyme, but to help break down big food particles into smaller food particles is, any idea what they are? You have 32 of them in your mouth.
Taste buds.
Your teeth. Yes. Your teeth. Because your stomach, remember earlier I said your stomach doesn't have teeth. That was a little clue about this conversation, right? You're like, oh, neat. Yeah, just happened. No. So our teeth, we got to chew our food until it's broken down more. And lettuce, we might go chomp, chomp, chew, and then we poop out and we're like, oh, look, there's chunks of lettuce in there. And there's some tomatoes. There's a little bit of corn, you know? So that is our body not breaking down the foods. Like corn is a very common one. I don't even think corn is.
We shouldn't even eat corn.
No.
Just be.
No, we should, right? I mean, it just comes out the way. Like even if you chew it a bunch of times, it seems like it just comes out back as normal, right? So when we have undigested food in your stool, that's also an indication that Agni is weak, meaning your digestion. Your ability to metabolize, to digest, to process foods. Okay, so stuff in the stool is an indication that something's going on. Feeling a little bit tired. All of those symptoms are an indication that your body isn't digesting, absorbing properly. Cool? Cool. Okay. So what can cause gas and bloating? First of all, what's bloating? Did I say anything about bloating yet? No. What's bloating, right? Is that like, right? Bloating is trapped gas. It's when gas gets stuck. That's it. It's trapped gas. So it's an indication. I said a little bit about Vata, right, where it's the wind. Well, we have all these subdoshas, and Vata is supposed to be able to move upward and downward, or the down, or around, or like there's 5 different ways, essentially, that the wind is supposed to move. And so when we have bloating, it means the wind is not moving, and it's just kind of stuck. Okay, so yeah, so we just need to get the gas out. So a nice massage can be really great. Doing that little bit of a palpate on the cecum can be another great thing. I'll get into other things that we can do, okay? But that's all bloating is, trapped gas, okay? So what can cause gas and bloating? Well, we talked about that at the beginning, right? You guys said a bunch of different foods that can cause gas and bloating, right? Stress, we talked about that a little bit. We said how nervous system is in the gut, and then you notice when you're feeling that butterflies, it might create some gas. It might make you have those sort of athletic poops, right? High sugar foods, they like carbohydrates as well, but sorbitol and fructose, those are ones that can create more gas and bloating. And that's because of the way that they break down, but also that there's a little bit more fermentation. So we'll get into fermentation a little bit. So fermented foods, are they good or are they bad?
Good.
Yeah. Well, Greg.
That depends. Spend a lot of time with it.
Depends. That depends. Okay, so if we have a lot of gas, if we have a lot of bloating, in the beginning I said that that was what was happening with your food. Your food was doing what? Fermenting, right. So if you have all of this fermentation going on and you add more fermented foods to it, what's going to happen?
You'll have a volcano.
Well, yeah, right, yes. So it's not, in Ayurveda, Ayurveda is about opposite therapy. Quite simply put, opposite therapy. And the easiest one that I always go to, because we know this very well living in the north, is when we're cold, what do we do in the winter? We put more clothes on, right? When we're cold, get a blanket. You dress more, you put more clothes on. So we know the opposite of what to do when we're cold, we get warm, right? So if we have fermentation and we add more fermentation, then we're just getting colder essentially, right? It's like, I'm freezing cold, but I'm gonna take all my clothes off and just stand out in the cold, right? You're not gonna get warm, right? Well, you might, I don't know. Anyways, so it can be good for those who are maybe a little bit more, when you're not experiencing gas and bloating. I wouldn't suggest it, but of course, be mindful of it, right? Because sometimes maybe that little bit of fermentation might help to get things moving. Don't know. However, fermentation, probably not the best thing. But we want to warm up the body to help things kind of move a little bit, because that fermentation can be a matter of, I'm going to go to the different doshas for a second. The fermentation can be a matter of, let's say it's more matter of the vata, what I talked about, the wind, okay? So if we think about the qualities of wind. Wind is cold, wind is erratic, Wind can be dry, right? So cold and dry and erratic going on in your body. Erratic, like mobile, okay? So what's the opposite of cold? Warm. So we can have our food, eat our food warm. We can have the warm water. What's the opposite of dry? Right, having some goo, slippery elm, that might help, right? And what's the opposite of mobile?
Come on, people can answer all of it. Still.
Still, stable, exactly, still, stable. So something that's gonna feel grounding. So maybe a nice yoga practice or something like that. Maybe if you're like yoga, then there's other things, right? Something that's going to bring you some peace and some calm. So those are some balancing things that you can do. If you're having fermentation because there's excess gas, which would be more of a pitta type thing, excess acidity, you're experiencing irritability, you're experiencing acne, you're experiencing, or skin rashes, eczema, things like that, okay? If you're experiencing those types of things. If you're experiencing like poops where you're, that athletic one that we talked about, or if you look down and it looks like a bunch of French fries, okay? That's an indication. Sorry. It's okay. That's an indication that there's inflammation going on inside. So inflammation, what would we want to do? Flame? Yeah, cool down, exactly. So we want to calm the flame a little bit. So more grounding things can help, like the licorice root that we talked about, that can help because that's a little more calming, cooling, and grounding. There's some really, really great herbs that I love. One is called amalaki, and that is it's a fruit. It's essentially like from the India area, but that is a wonderful anti-inflammatory herb that you can use. And it's a fruit, right? So it's like eating blueberries. So if you have some amalaki, it's okay. What's that? No, she doesn't have any amalaki here, but if you shop on Amazon, you can get it on Amazon. There's Organic Traditions makes an amalaki, I believe. That's the brand, Organic Traditions, and that one is on Amazon. You can get it there. There's a couple of Ayurvedic sites too, if you want to check on there. Sometimes you can shop around a little bit. And if any of you want to try it out and play around with it too, I have lots. Yes, Greg?
It might just be amla berry as well.
Well, yeah, amla berry. Sometimes it's written amla berry, AMLA berry, or amalaki, AMALAKI. Yeah. There's also another one called Bhumi Amalaki, but that's something different. Okay. So there's another one too that's really great, and it's a root, and it's red, and it is a blood purifier. So the blood purifier, and it's called
Mangista.
Yes, Mangista. So it's called Mangista powder. And so this one is interesting because my oldest child, 14 years old, is very, very much fire and water. So very emotional. All of a sudden, like calm, and then all of a sudden, like woo, and then all of a sudden, like completely down, and like just very variable that way. But a lot of acne, a lot of skin conditions and issues. Okay, and sometimes she leaves a treat in the toilet, so I look at it because they don't always flush. But anyways, it's inflammation. It's poop inflammation, right? So what we've been doing with them is Mangista powder every night with some amalaki, and I put a little bit of honey because honey also helps to cut mucus and inflammation. She's got some kapha going on because there's some excess water and stuff, and the acne, like I said, is a damp thing. And so we've been doing it usually like an herb regimen is for about 2 weeks and kind of see how it feels and stuff. And the acne is like clearing up like awesome, like crazy. And they're feeling better. And so, I mean, there's still sort of those waves and stuff, and that's okay. But those two there's not a whole lot of contraindications with them. And so if it's seeming to work, does it mean that it's going to be something that you would have to have forever? No, it's just until you find the balance again. And that's the beautiful thing about herbs is some days I might feel like I need a little bit of ashwagandha and a little bit of brahmi bicopa with it, and I take that because I'm just feeling but then the next day I'm okay, but then I have a little bit of inflammation, so then I have some amalaki. But that's all about learning. Okay, so all of that what I just said was probably like like Kenny, you know, like, oh my God, they keep getting, you know, you guys know that, you know? Okay. So it's just things that you can learn and start to kind of play around with, okay? But it's, if you're just here learning about Ayurveda for the first time, the second time, the third time, it can be a very long journey and a very exciting journey. So just take a couple things from there. That's all. You don't have to take it all in one shot, okay? So now the kapha is the more earth and the more water. And so when we think about the ground and the earth and you put your hand in the earth, how does it feel temperature-wise? Well, the surface. Put your hand a little lower. Yeah, it depends, right? It depends if the sun heated it up. So yeah, generally cooler, right? Where the dew worms are and stuff. So it generally feels a little bit cooler. It's thicker. It's unctuous. It's stable. It doesn't really move very well, right? If you think about dirt, let's think about dirt and added water to it, right? So that it's stagnation in the body. And so that is our father, right? With more stagnation, just holding on to more kapha types tend to be very patient. They tend to be great parents, but very, very like stable in their life. Like they don't need much, you know, they're good with just their family and just this stuff, and they're good with just a little bit of stuff. So they're very stable, okay? So what they would need more is, my husband also is, he's got a good chunk of pitta, but he's also kapha. So we go for a walk, okay? We go for a walk, and I'm walking, I'm like, because you just walk slow, right? Like, come on, go a little faster. So that's more of like a kapha type. They're just good, just going slow, just rolling. So sometimes I gotta really slow down my pitta and like walk back with him and then make him come just a bit faster, you know? So with them, they thrive on diet and exercise. That's easy, right? So just eating lighter and moving more. That's it. It's really quite, and because they have that stability to them, because they're very grounded, they're very stable, it's really hard to get them to do something. Like you literally have to take a blowtorch under their butt to get them to do something. But once they've decided that they want to do it and they stick to it, they tend to be really great at sticking to it. It's just, yeah, the lights are all funky. So that's a good kapha one. Cool? All right. Okay, so I feel like we've talked about that a little bit. We talked about that. I'm just gonna double check. Oh, we don't need to talk about. Oh God, what time did we start at?
You talk a lot.
I'm sorry. Oh my God, I talk forever. Okay, what can we do? Okay, so what's the first thing on your list if you look at what you can do?
Eat easy foods to digest that will warm your gut and use mild spices.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to think about this together. What are some foods that might be easy to digest? Any examples? If you've been in any of our programs, you probably know a couple right away. Soup. Yes. And why is soup easy to digest? Because it's already partially digested for you, right? Yeah. So it's partially digested for you. If you're using soup and you're using some bone broth, then you get some good collagen in there, so some good fats, right? So that'll help to feed the fat system in the body. That'll help to feed the nervous system in the body. So soups are really great. Things that are more easy, fruits are easy to digest as well. But if you have fruits, when you can like stew them, the skin of the fruits aren't as easy to digest, but the rest of the fruits are easy to digest. So think about what you feed to a baby, right? So don't go out and buy a bunch of baby jars of baby food, like make your own, right? So sweet potatoes are a little bit easier to digest. Things that you don't have to chew as much, let's say, but you still want to chew it. So soups, stews, casseroles, oatmeal, things like that, okay? So those are things that are a little bit more easy. And what you digest that's easy, right? Because let's say for Natalie, broccoli, you digest well. It's just fine. That would be an easy food for you. But Leah, gas and bloating, not easy for you, right? So it's just about getting in tune with your digestion and noticing what's easy and what's not at the same time, okay? So that's a big one there. And then the next one, so also some mild spices. So mild spices that really help to warm. A good one is clove. Clove is a great one for more vata type disorders as well. It can be good for pitta too. So it's a little bit, it's not as hot. It's not cold, but it's not as hot. Okay. Cinnamon might be a nice one, and not the jar of cinnamon that's been in your cupboard for like 6 months. You know, get some new stuff, or have some real cinnamon bark, right? Cardamom is another good one that's like mildly spiced, so that's another great one. Any types of aromatic herbs as well that helps to evacuate the bowels. So aromatic just meaning when they smell good, right? They smell strong. So cardamom is a good one. Peppermint is a good, I know I said cardamom because a lot of the herbs fall into many categories. Peppermint, rosemary, right? If you think about those ones, the ones that smell really strong. Cilantro is a great one, and it's more cooling. That's a great one for more pitta type stuff. So those sort of help to get the bowels moving. You know, like after you eat supper, you might have heard of a family, their tradition is to have peppermint tea afterwards. And that's to help digestion. It's to help kind of calm the inflammation that might have been happening and to help get the bowels moving, essentially. Okay.
And a walk.
And the walk. Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that we do, actually, I'll wait till we go down to food eating routine. What's number 2?
Foods.
Yeah. So cooked foods. And why might cooked foods be better, right? As opposed to a granola bar.
Soft.
Yeah.
Easier to digest.
Right, yeah, easier to chew, right? Easier to chew, easier to digest. Usually when you cooked foods, you're not going to cook a granola bar, right? You take a granola bar out of the bag and just put it in some water and like, ew, right? So those types of foods, cereals, things like that, you're doing it because it's quick and you're just kind of grabbing it and eating it, right? Those tend to be a lot harder to digest. Anything that's in a package. So basically the whole freaking grocery store, no.
Just do around.
Yeah, exactly. Just around, pretty much. Yeah, a few things in the aisles, and yeah, not too much. So yeah, so just eating more cooked foods, and there's also a nice psychological and emotional element of eating cooked foods. Is whether you have someone cook for you, that's wonderful, or you're cooking for yourself. It's just there's meant to be enjoyment in food. There's meant to be peace and calm in food, right? And so it's about that kind of togetherness and the experience of food. Yeah. Rice, yes. Rice would be on easy to digest. Yeah. White rice. So like white long grain rice, like jasmine and basmati rice, those are easier to digest. Yeah. If you are noticing, if you eat basmati rice and you have rice in your stools, that is a very big indication of super weak agni. So come and see me. Okay. So if you see rice in your poop. Yeah.
Why white over like a brown rice or something? What's the difference?
Great question.
Thank you.
Great
Did they
question.
not say
Yes.
We didn't
white
practice.
is stripped out?
Pardon?
White rice and stripped out of white rice?
Yeah, it's just a different type, right? So when there's more grain, if we think about grains in general, they tend to be harder to digest, right? Because there's just more bits to them, let's say, right? Whereas white rice might be more like just like a white, easy rice potato kind of thing. So it's just about the complexity of it. That's all it is. It's the energy and the complexity of it. So brown rice, you might notice bloats you. White rice might be great. So if you can have white rice, but you can't have brown rice, then white rice is your friend. Yeah. Right? So it's what you can't digest. Cool? Does that answer?
Cool.
Okay. So number 3. What's number 3?
Avoid 4 foods combined.
Yeah. And this is a tricky one, right? This is one that, if we've grown up in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, any of that, we did a lot of bad food combining. We would have yogurt and fruit, dairy and fruit. And that's because they take different digestive enzymes to break them down. There's hundreds of digestive enzymes, but essentially the fruit digests faster than what the dairy does. And what happens when dairy is kind of sitting in juices, it sort of curdles. So when you think about that, you're like, ew. So, and when you were younger, we would have a glass of milk with our supper, right? But the milk is curdling. You're having the glass of milk, and then you're having a steak, and then you're having potatoes, and then you're having some broccoli. A lot of pork food combined. Okay. So essentially, when you have any more than 2 difficult foods together, that's poor food combining, because it's very hard on the digestive system to break down. So easy to digest soup, hard to digest a sandwich, right? Because you have the bread, which is harder to process. The bread is gooey. You have a tiny piece of lettuce, raw lettuce on top. Then maybe you have some processed meat in there, and then maybe you have some cheese in there. A whole lot of difficult. Okay, so that would be the scale of easy to tough to hard to digest.
So you say yogurt is not good?
Right. Yes.
Rocks.
Yes.
I can send them a document if you want that breaks down with like a photo, like it's an infographic thing.
Okay.
So I can, if you
That
want
has
to
like
send.
an easy to light.
Yeah, it's an
Okay.
it's an Ayurvedic one.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's an Ayurvedic food
Sure.
combining one that I can send to you guys. Just send me a
Yeah.
message on Messenger and I'll send it to you.
Yeah. So essentially, I know, and you know what, the yogurts. If she goes to the yogurts, right? Like all the yogurts that you buy in the store is like yogurt mixed with fruit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, like the plain Greek.
Yeah. So there, plain Greek. There you go. So have your plain Greek yogurt. An hour later, have a piece of fruit.
Oh.
Easy peasy, right? I know you want it together. It's okay.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. But so if you're noticing, okay, I will say one thing. Yes, go ahead first, Jen.
What's your take on making your own yogurt? Because I make my own kefir grain. I have my own kefir grains and I make my own yogurt.
Yeah.
And milk and all that.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
So according to like Ayurveda, there's something called a takra. And a takra is a really great yogurt. Making your own yogurt is fine. That's totally cool. But there's a really great takra recipe, or there's a lot of different recipes, but essentially what you can do with that, making your own yogurt, have like a half a cup of yogurt in some warm water, and then you can put some warming spices in there, like some clove and some cardamom. You can put a little bit of maple syrup or a little tiny bit of honey, mix all that up in your blender, and then drink that. And that is very nourishing for gut flora, very nourishing for vata.
I usually throw a lot of berries and make a smoothie.
Yes, yeah. So essentially, when you're adding the berries in with the dairy, then it's just adding more difficult, right? And so smoothies were like, we've all did it. I used to drink a ton of smoothies, and then I'd have a smoothie, and I'm like, God, I'm bloated, but it's so good for you, you know. And you have all it has all these like protein powders and fruits and milks, and then I throw some seeds and some nuts in there, and it's a whole lot of difficult. So the main thing is just notice how you feel, right? If you have it and you're feeling that, we'll always come back to that. Notice how you feel. If you're having it and you're feeling bloated and you're feeling, you know, then maybe try it without the fruit next time and see how that feels, you know? So that being said though, times of day. So if we go down to eating routine, okay, so number 4, eating routine, it would be to set yourself up with a routine, right? Eat generally, you know, wake 6 a.m., have your breakfast around 8 a.m., maybe have some lunch around 12:30 p.m., and then have a supper around 5 p.m., you know, you can have like some fruit snacks in between or whatever, but it's all about eating the same times of day. And the reason you want to eat the same times of day is because the body needs routine. The mind wants to wander and the mind wants variety, but the body needs routine. The blood majority of the blood has to go to your digestive organs to be able to digest your food. If you're driving and you're eating, your digestion is not focused on digesting your food. It is focused on driving your car, watching where you're going, paying attention to other people, right? Even if you're sitting in deep thought, the blood is going there and the body is focused on thought. It's not focused on digestion. But if you tell your body, okay, every day we're gonna eat at 8 a.m., it'll take a while to get that routine going, but then your body will it'll be like, okay guys, let's get ready. Here comes some food. And then, you know, you'll eat it and you'll digest it well. And then you will notice that your poop starts to happen on a regular basis. You'll start to notice that your sleep is much better. Like my husband, when I get him to sort of do like Ayurvedic resets, let's say, he always gets into it and he notices that he's sleeping better right away. That's a huge thing for him, you know, that I'm sleeping better. And then you have a weekend where we're like, okay, let's indulge a little bit. And then all of a sudden that next week he's like, can't sleep, you know? So it makes a big difference when you feed your body better, but when you stick to that routine as well. Cool. So just set yourself up with a routine, whatever routine works best for you. Maybe if you're a little bit of hypoglycemic, a little bit issues with the thyroid, with the hormones, you know, maybe a bit of anemia, then you might want to set yourself up with 4 meals a day. It's really going to be completely varied, because the wonderful thing is that she digests this, but then she doesn't, right? She needs 3 meals, she can do 2, right? So it really depends. Yeah, and it really depends, but it's always set yourself up with the same thing. Aim to be a lighter meal in the morning. Aim to have a lighter meal for supper. Have your bigger meal in the day. If you're in the, like for lunch, if in the lunchtime when the sun is the hottest. And if you do indulge, if you decide to have a whole lot of difficult, have a burger, have a sandwich or whatever, do it in the middle of the day. That's when your body's the strongest, but not when you're sick. Don't do it when you're sick, right? If you're sick, you're not feeling well, you got, you know, stress or whatever going on, be easy on digestion. Make yourself a nice grandma's chicken soup, which is the easiest thing, right? Which is basically bone broth, chicken, white rice, celery, and carrots. Yeah, easy peasy, right? A little bit of cardamom, maybe a little bit of cumin. Cumin is another nice one. Yeah, cumin is a good one too. It's not super hot. Okay, so that's as far as an eating routine. And then number 5 was the what? Hydration. Yeah, and we talked a bit about hydration too. Okay. Cool. So a couple of extras, if you want to write some extras down, then you most certainly can. But a couple of extras is to, especially when you're experiencing the gas and bloating, is maybe avoid carbonated drinks, right? Because we tend to like carbonated drinks when they're cold. So i.e. first thing cold, constricting, but they also create gas, right? Because they're gas. Yeah, it's like a party in our mouth. It's wonderful. But when you're experiencing a lot of gas and bloating, maybe don't have it, right? Okay. Different yoga poses that you can do, exercise. Yeah, go ahead.
Just one quick question.
Yeah.
You said something about just like
Carbonated.
Carbonated, yeah.
What about kombucha?
Right, okay, so kombucha, it can be, right? Kombucha can be carbonated. I would like to try some, so next time when you see me, you're ready to know.
Tastes
But-
something like that
yeah,
you get at the
yeah.
store.
Oh my
It's
God,
okay.
no, it's so good.
Like that, it's good. So kombucha, it's fermented,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So if it's fermented and more fermenting going on, then we don't want excess. And generally with kombucha, there's this whole more kombucha craze, and you get this big kombucha and you drink the whole freaking thing.
Oh God.
Like an ounce. All you literally need, like when you have kombucha, 1 ounce a day. That's enough. Okay, so kombucha can be really great, and it might be better maybe in the morning, because then in the morning it might light some digestive juices to get going, you know, as opposed to once you're feeling gas and bloated, maybe it can be used to light of me a little bit, to light digestion. Okay, so that's kombucha. Cool. Okay, so other things that we can do, you know, we talked about rubbing the belly, using some oils on the belly. We can do some different yoga poses. So nice yoga poses that are great is ones where you're kind of twisting a little bit, you know, so when you're sort of twisting, almost think about it as like trying to kind of wring it out to get things to move, okay? You can do different inversions, work really well, but if you're like, I don't want to hang upside down, you know, even if you do like a downward facing dog, like that kind of thing is great. This is one of my favorite ones, and it's great for the nervous system too, and it's just legs up the wall and you just literally chill. So that's another great one you can do. There are many, yeah, and you didn't see that camera, no. So there are many things that you can do there too, and we're gonna do one thing together now, okay? So put your thing down. I went upside down, and I got some water in my mouth. I got some air in my mouth. Okay, so you can sit back down on your chair if you want. We're just gonna do a little bit of belly breathing. Okay, so have a seat in your chair. Right. Or you can stand if you want to. I was getting you to take your thing that you're writing on and just put it down. But I didn't explain that well. Sorry, didn't explain it well. Okay, so put your hand on your belly, okay? So belly breathing, that's one thing we can do. So sit up, so you want to sit up so that you are sitting in your chair, right? Move your back against the back of the chair, or really wherever is fine. Okay, and then what you want to do is when you breathe in, I don't want an enema right now. Wait. Yeah, that's an hour one. So when you breathe in, essentially you let your belly expand, and so that might be different breathing for you. So try not, when you're breathing, try not to like all in your, just relax your shoulders. Let your shoulders just kind of draw back and down. Because if you hold a lot of stress in there, then that's another thing going on. Okay, so when you breathe in, you let your belly expand. So you see it, look at your belly and be like, oh, my belly. Like let it go out big. And then when you breathe out, pull it in. Okay, so just the belly, just the low belly. Put your hand on your belly. So breathe in, let it go out. When you breathe out, pull it in. It's weird. And so if that's opposite breathing for you, then that's an indication that you are, according to Ayurveda and different yoga texts and practices, that you're more in the fight or flight. So more in your sympathetic nervous system as opposed to your parasympathetic. So when we want to come into that more rest and digest, then inhale, belly expands, exhale, pull the belly in. Inhale, belly expands, exhale, pull it in. So when you do it, you might notice that at first when you're doing it, you're like, you know, right? But then eventually you might be able to like just kind of like palpate the belly, and then the rest of your body's like, what's going on? You know, you can do it, right? And so that essentially is, yeah, right, yeah. And so that essentially is like bringing the awareness back into your gut. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. When you look at a baby breathe, they're like, you know, our ribs are meant, they're supposed to move when we breathe, but we tend to like tense up everything in our life, and we're just like, well, let's just get tense and let's go. And that's it, right? So when you hold on to your ribs like that, your ribs should be floating open and closed. They should essentially be going. But don't worry, if your ribs are not, it is okay. Okay, because I was in a yoga training years ago now, and there was like 40 people in it, and there were only 2 of us where our ribs were actually floating. Everybody else was nothing. So it's okay, don't worry. It takes practice to get that to come back. More importantly, it takes removing your stress, which is way easier said than done, right? So that's another thing you can do. Play around with that belly breathing. I invite you to. And then it'll connect you to pelvic floor again. And then if you want to speed up and do it a little bit faster like that, then you certainly can. Cool. And you might notice that you're like doing this at first. So look at yourself in the mirror and see if you're just belly and not shoulders. Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. Laugh at yourself. That is the best thing. Okay. And then ultimately, of course, you know, reduce your stress, and everyone's like, just reduce your stress, just reduce it. And you're like, okay. How? Right? But then we have, yeah, right. And then you have the glass of wine and it's the stimulant, and so it's not reducing stress. It feels like it's the moment. Yeah, yeah. So, all right. So I think I talked about some herbs, talked about the stress. Okay, good. Cool. Does anybody have any questions? Sorry, I kept you longer. I could talk too long about all this stuff. So.
Don't look at me.
Well,
It's your fault.
They all.
You're the timekeeper.
Yeah.
no, I am. I'm usually better at
She's
keeping
actually
time.
right. She's
When
just dead on.
I teach a yoga practice, I'm like balls
dead
on. When I do stuff like this, it's very hard to stop talking. What's that?
2-hour one.
Yeah,
Okay, I have a
yeah,
question.
hey. Sorry, yes.
3 top takeaways or practices that we can incorporate. What would it be?
The 3 top ones. Routine.
Thank you. That's the 4th.
Yeah, routine. All 5 of those. Yeah. What are your takeaways though? Do you have any questions? What are your takeaways? What are you like? I'm tired.
I find on weekends it's harder to get the routine.
Right.
I get up later, so I have my breakfast later, so I don't eat lunch. I only, eat my supper
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to get that routine.
Yeah.
On weekends especially.
And when you're working like from home, but you have to go everywhere, it's like, I forget to pee most of the time, so never mind eating, so.
Yeah, yeah. I hear you. You gotta just set yourself up with that routine, right? And as best as you can. as best as you can.
Yeah.
But to not feel bad to take that time for yourself during the day, let's say you're meeting with clients, right? Well, that client can wait 5 minutes so that you can take a couple of deep breaths and just kind of let it be, right? And as far as the weekend goes, right? Why are you sleeping in on the weekend? Why do you feel like you need that indulgent? Why do you feel like your routine is off? Is it the stress from the week?
Yeah.
Right? And so you might do yourself more of a solid by continuing with that routine on the weekend, reducing your stress during the week and just keeping that routine in your body, because it can be more of a detriment to just completely fall off on the weekend and then come back and then fall off. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? It is hard to do. And essentially it's up to you. You have to set yourself, you have to make it a priority, right? And just because, I practice this stuff on a regular basis, do I always do it perfectly? No. Ayurveda, living your natural life, whatever the heck you're doing, it's just about doing better more often. That's it. Just do better more often. And just notice how you feel when you do better more often, The more you don't do better, then the more like crap you do. Yeah. So give yourself some good job. Yeah. Give yourself a hug and that whole jazz. Awesome. So if anybody has any questions though that like pop up, at 3 a.m. when you wake up for a pee, don't send me a message then, but send me a message now. Okay? Yeah. Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.